That time of year thou mayst in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none, or few, do hang upon those boughs that shake against the cold. Bare ruined choirs where late the sweet birds sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self that seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. This thou perceiv'st, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. So we started talking about this yesterday, but this sonnet falls in the middle of this group of sonnets that's all to do with death. For whatever reason, at this time, Shakespeare was preoccupied with thoughts of his own mortality. He seemed very aware of his own old age and his impending death, and he was exploring that in this group of sonnets to the fair youth. Now, this particular sonnet seems to be all about the passage of time. Now, time is a recurring theme in the sonnets. And John Barton, who was one of the co-founders of the Royal Shakespeare Company, he hypothesized that time was perhaps Shakespeare's favorite noun. Now, I would tend to agree with that assessment, just from the way that he uses it. And I think it's worth mentioning that at the time, the word was pronounced a little bit differently. Again, we were talking a few days ago about how the Elizabethan dialect was more similar to a modern-day Irish or Scottish brogue than it was to the British RP that we're used to hearing. So it would have sounded almost like it was two syllables. Time, that time of year thou mayst in me behold. It would have sounded more similar to that. And I just think that's worth mentioning because it adds weight to that word. It feels different in your mouth. There's a kind of power that comes along with pronouncing that word that way. And I just think it explains part of the reason why maybe Shakespeare loved it so much. But anyway, just talking about the way that he shows the passage of time in this sonnet, I'm intrigued by the structure because it's divided into 3 quatrains, and each quatrain is devoted to a different metaphor for Shakespeare's old age. So the first quatrain, he's comparing his old age to autumn, late fall, early winter, that time of year when yellow leaves or none or few do hang. And he compares the bare boughs of the trees to empty choir lofts where the birds used to sing. In the second quatrain, he's comparing his old age to twilight, to day turning to night. And in the third, he's comparing his old age to a fire that's about to be smothered in its own ashes, consumed with that which it was nourished by. Now, what's interesting to me about these metaphors is not the metaphors themselves, because we've already seen those in the sonnets. Every one of them he's used already. But it's the order in which he places them. They go from longest duration to shortest duration, a year, a day, the burning of a fire. And I think what he's doing with that is creating this illusion of time speeding up, which it tends to do when you're getting older and death is approaching. And let's look at this final couplet too. This thou perceiv'st, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. Now, when I first read that, I read that as, you see all of this in me, you see that I'm getting closer to death, and you love me anyway, and that makes your love more strong, loving something that you know you're going to lose very soon. But he uses the word leave, not lose, to love that well which thou must leave ere long, which makes me think it could also mean he's referring to the fair youth's youth. To love his own youth, which he knows he's going to have to lose ere long. His own youth is going to leave him. So whether that couplet, that final couplet, is about the fair youth's love of Shakespeare or the fair youth's love of his own youth, again, like yesterday, I'm going to say, if you ask me if Shakespeare meant this or this, I'm going to say yes, he meant both. So yeah, a really, really beautifully structured sonnet. Yeah, isn't it lovely? So that's Sonnet 73. That's all I've got for today. I'll see you tomorrow, everybody. Stay safe. Bye.